Thanks so much, Naabia, for passing me the glass. I'm Robin Abell, and I work at the Nature Conservancy as the director of our global durable freshwater protection work. What I do in my job is collaborate every day with amazing colleagues and partners around the world to make sure that healthy freshwater ecosystems like rivers, lakes, and wetlands can support biodiversity and provide benefits to people for generations to come. So I'm focused less on water as a resource and more on freshwater ecosystems as habitats for extraordinarily rich and diverse communities of species and as systems that are critical for supporting the health and well-being of people everywhere. To put just a finer point on the diversity of these systems, freshwater ecosystems, rivers, and lakes cover just about 2% of the planet, but they're home to about 12% of all of our known species. And that includes a third of our known vertebrate species and more than half of all fish species. So just take a moment to think about that. Think about the vastness of the ocean and this tiny fraction of water in our freshwater systems. And that tiny fraction has more than half of the world's fish species in it. Here's another number that's incredible to me. Since 2020, over 200 new species of freshwater fish have been described every year. Now, just to put that in perspective, every year maybe 5 or 6 new bird species are described. So 200 fish species, freshwater fish species a year since 2020. What does that tell us? It tells us that Western science at least has so much more to learn about the wealth of life in these freshwater systems. So I share those numbers as context as I take you to this next statistic, the one that I wish that everyone knew. It comes from a paper that was just published in January 2025. And that paper told us that 1/4 of freshwater animal species are threatened with extinction. So let me just say that again. 1/4 of freshwater animal species are threatened with extinction. That number to me is both staggering, but it's also not surprising. We already knew that monitored populations of freshwater animals have declined in size by about 85% since 1970. And when populations get too small, they just can't persist. So, why are freshwater species in so much trouble? Well, it's really just one thing. Most freshwater systems are being affected by a combination of threats, things like dams and water withdrawals and land use change, and especially agriculture. If you think about it, think about rivers or lakes, they typically sit at the lowest point of the landscape. And that means that they're integrating stresses that are originating upstream and also upland in their watersheds. Those threats are largely manifested in freshwater ecosystems through the water, on which all of those aquatic species depend. So it's really no wonder that so many of those species are imperiled. With that in mind, I'm hoping that others will see water not just as a resource to be managed to meet human needs, but as the equivalent of the air that we breathe and the ground that we walk on for those aquatic freshwater species. These species are generally pretty invisible to us. They're underwater. We don't usually go snorkeling in rivers and lakes, but their continued survival is going to depend on choices that we make every day about the food that we eat and the energy that we use and the way that we live. What gives me hope is that we do have solutions. We don't have to choose between the health of freshwater biodiversity and the health of human society. What's good for one is ultimately good for the other if we take the long view and we don't succumb to quick fixes that might end up doing unintended harm. There are brilliant people all over the world working to protect and restore freshwater ecosystems, and we're making progress. In 2022, 196 countries agreed through the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework to protect freshwater systems as part of the so-called 30 by 30 target, so 30% protection by 2030. And right now, those countries are defining how they're going to achieve their goals through their new national biodiversity plans. At the same time, local communities are coming together to make sure that the cultural and recreational and economic and biodiversity values of rivers, lakes, and wetlands are protected over the long term. Because in the end, all freshwater conservation is local. And with that, I would like to pass the glass to Nicole Silk, the Nature Conservancy's Global Director of Freshwater Outcomes. I've known and worked with Nicole probably over the last 25 years, and I have enormous respect and admiration for everything that she's done to help advance our work in freshwater conservation. Thank you.